Hello everyone and welcome back. My name is Jason, and today we delve into the tragic story of Kassandra Cantrell, a 33-year-old woman who went missing in Parkland, Washington on August 25, 2020. Kassandra Cantrell lived with her mother Marie in Parkland, Washington. She was outgoing and full of life. She loved vintage clothes. She loved spending time with her best friend Alexandra and her family. And she was looking forward to a new chapter in her life, becoming a mother. On July 16th, Kassandra went to the doctors and she was told she was pregnant. Her joyous discovery of pregnancy filled her with unexpected happiness. Although it was unforeseen, she embraced the prospect of becoming a mother because she thought her window of having a baby had passed. She'd already picked out names, and she had all these plans laid out for what kind of life her baby would have. Kassandra's first sonogram was scheduled for August 26th at 1:45 p.m., and she was supposed to meet her best friend, Alexandra, there, but Kassandra never showed up. The next day, August 27th, Kassandra's mother Marie called 911 and filled a missing persons report on her daughter. During the initial investigation, police were able to identify their main suspect pretty early on. Marie had told them that her daughter was pregnant, but did not have a boyfriend. However, Marie mentioned that Kassandra had an ex-boyfriend who she was still friendly with, named Colin. And although her daughter had told her the father of her child was another guy that she'd gone out with only a few times, Marie suspected the father of this baby was actually this ex-boyfriend. Upon speaking to Kassandra's friend Alexandra, police discovered that Kassandra had been seeing Colin over the past few months because she was lonely in quarantine, and that she believed Colin was the father of her child, but she was too afraid to tell him because he didn't want children, and he had a bit of an anger problem. Apparently, when they had dated several years prior, Colin had told Kassandra that if any of his girlfriends ever got pregnant and refused to terminate the pregnancy, he would sue them for custody just to spite the mother for having the child against his wishes. In the doctor's notes from Kassandra's July 16th doctor appointment, it stated that this pregnancy was not planned, that the patient was feeling overwhelmed, and that the father of the baby was supportive of the pregnancy, but not planning to be involved with raising the child. However, the doctor's notes also said that he and the mother were on good terms. I suspect that Kassandra told her doctor that her baby's father would be supportive of the pregnancy because it doesn't appear that she actually told Colin she was pregnant until the following month, just days before she went missing. Kassandra had told her friend Alexandra that she told Colin on August 12th that she was pregnant, but he didn't have to be involved. She just thought he had the right to know, and he could give up his parental rights and she wouldn't ask him for child support. And 2 weeks later, she was gone. The detectives canvassed the neighborhood where Kassandra lived and found a neighbor who supplied them with video from their Ring doorbell, which would become the last known footage of Kassandra alive. This video showed a white car matching the description of Kassandra's 2015 white Mazda 3 sedan, leaving the neighborhood with a single occupant driver at 8:32 a.m. As search parties began organizing to locate Kassandra, detectives went to the home of Colin Dudley in Tacoma to question him about his connection to the missing woman, but nobody answered the door. The officers left their business cards, and as they were leaving, a neighbor approached and asked if they were looking for Colin and Rebecca. Who's Rebecca, you might ask? Well, apparently, according to this neighbor, Rebecca was Colin's girlfriend, and they'd purchased this house together 3 years prior, and they'd been living there together ever since. Later the same day, which was August 28th, Colin called one of the detectives and informed them that he'd gotten their business card, but he wasn't sure what he could do to help them. He wasn't sure what he had to do with this. He knew Kassandra, but he hadn't seen her in years, and he knew nothing about her disappearance. But of course, at this point, the police weren't taking anyone's word at face value. They knew that Colin had in fact been in contact with Kassandra since he'd been named as the father of her baby to her doctor and several others. and the fact that he acted as if he'd had no contact with her for years was obviously suspicious. So, they told him they still wanted to interview him in person, which they did the next day, August 29th. Early on the morning of that day, detectives were notified that Kassandra's vehicle had been found abandoned near the Tacoma Dome Sports Center with the keys in the center console. Kassandra's mother did not believe that her daughter had driven herself there because she had no reason to be in this area. Investigators also discovered through Kassandra's mother, Marie, that Kassandra had been communicating with someone on August 19th who had a phone number Marie didn't recognize. It only took a quick research to discover that this phone number was, in fact, Kassandra's ex-boyfriend, Colin Dudley's number, who claimed he had not seen her or talked to her in years. Using this new information, the police were able to secure a warrant for Colin Dudley's cell phone records, which led to the discovery that Kassandra and Colin had been regularly communicating since February 2020. So when detectives arrived at Colin's home for their preset interview, they were already armed with quite a bit of information, but he had no idea. The story that Colin told detectives was that he and Kassandra had met during a production of the Rocky Horror Picture Show, during which she was a cast member and he was the director. They had dated for a couple of months, and then he'd broken up with her sometime in 2006. Since then, he claimed to have only seen her one other time in 2010 or 2011 when he saw her working in the mall. This is honestly what stumped me about this whole case. I'm questioning what his game plan was. Even if you're not a fan of true crime, you have to know that if someone's missing, law enforcement will most likely look into this missing person's cell phone records to find out people that they'd recently been in contact with. Colin had texted Kassandra that same morning, the morning she went missing, as we will later discuss as we go over the timeline in more detail. So what was he hoping to achieve from outright denying that he'd even seen her in years? His alibi for the date of August 25th was that he had been off that day from work, and he was busy spring cleaning his house. When asked what he did on August 26th, Colin said he'd brought some garbage to a dumpster owned by his employer, and then he went and got his bike repaired. The cops gave him a chance to edit his story to come clean to at least having seen Kassandra in the weeks or the months leading up to her disappearance, but he refused to give an inch. When they told him about her pregnancy and that he was the father, he said that it was not possible. And he persisted in his story that he hadn't seen her in years. From the evidence gathered, we're able to piece together a timeline for what seems to have happened to Kassandra Cantrell on the last day of her life. On August 25th at 6:55 a.m., Colin Dudley went to Costco and purchased a large box of 50-gallon garbage bags. At 8:11 a.m., a truck matching the description of Colin's 2017 Chevy Colorado pulled into the Tacoma Dome parking garage. A male was seen on surveillance exiting the truck. He removed a mountain bike from the bed of the truck and he rode away, leaving the vehicle there, and that's where the truck would remain for several hours. At 8:35 a.m., Kassandra left her house driving her Mazda, and at 8:49 a.m., she received a text from Colin Dudley. When the police took Colin's phone, they were able to verify that he did have Kassandra's number stored in his phone as a contact, just not under her real name. He had her listed as Velma, like from Scooby-Doo. It turns out that Halloween was Kassandra's favorite holiday, and she'd previously dressed up as the character for Halloween. After getting that text from Colin at 8:49 a.m., Kassandra's cell phone traveled to Colin's house or in the vicinity of his neighborhood, and it remained there for a few hours. Records showed that Colin had turned his phone on and off several times throughout that morning. At 9:41 a.m., it was on and at his house, only to be turned off at 9:56 and remain off until 10:30, at which point Colin called the security company, ADT. Less than 30 minutes later, at 10:53 a.m., Colin texted his live-in girlfriend, Rebecca, telling her not to freak out. There had been a power outage, and the ADT security cameras were down, but he was working on getting them back up and running. At 11:39 a.m., Colin's phone was turned off again, but Kassandra's remained on and moved from Colin's house and traveled to the area where her vehicle would later be found, the Tacoma Dome. Police collected surveillance camera videos from the area, and as predicted, the person driving the Mazda wasn't Kassandra, but an unknown male wearing a fedora-type hat and latex gloves. This man, who we obviously believe was Colin Dudley, got out of Kassandra's car. He walked to the dome's parking garage and got into a truck, the same truck that had been parked there hours earlier by him. It was his getaway vehicle because he knew he was going to drive her car there and leave it, so he'd need transportation away from the dome. But Kassandra's phone did not stop moving even though her car remained stationary. It traveled with Colin's truck, leaving the parking garage at 11:58 a.m. and traveling to the Owen Beach area of Point Defiance Park, where the phone stopped pinging. After knowing this, Kassandra's mother was skeptical. Kassandra had gone to the park a few times before to walk her two chihuahuas, but she'd left her dogs at home this morning. And Marie didn't see any other reason why Kassandra would have been at Defiance Point Park. That's because Kassandra wasn't at Defiance Point Park. She wasn't at Owens Beach either, even though her phone was recovered there later. Kassandra, it seems, never made it out of her ex-boyfriend's house alive. Surveillance cameras captured a truck that looked like Colin's leaving Point Defiance Park just after 1 p.m., and around 1:30, Colin's phone turned back on at his home in Tacoma. Now, this is damning evidence, in my opinion. In using this evidence, law enforcement was able to secure a search warrant for Colin Dudley's home on September 1st, at which point they found blood in the basement. And then they brought in canine units trained in locating human remains, otherwise known as cadaver dogs. The dogs showed interest at various areas in the basement. At this point, they had a lot of evidence, but no body, and I believe they could have arrested Colin at this time, but they wanted to build a stronger case against him before doing so, which is what they went on to do for the next few weeks. And part of this gathering evidence process was to obtain data from the GPS in Colin's truck. Using this GPS data, they found out that Colin's truck had been to all of these places: the Dome Garage, Owens Beach, and on the morning of August 26th, as Kassandra should have been getting up and preparing for the excitement of her first ever sonogram, Colin Dudley was driving to an area near the Chambers Bay treatment plant. His truck remained at this location for just 10 minutes before returning to his house. It was September 22nd by the time the police had obtained this GPS data from Colin's truck, and this same day officers went to the area that Colin had been for just 10 minutes and began searching for what they now believed was a body. They found Kassandra's remains located inside garbage bags that had been thrown over a steep hill down into a ravine-like type area. Even to a regular person like you and me, this seems pretty obvious. Kassandra told Colin she was pregnant. He didn't like that, so he made plans to lure her to his home on the morning of the 25th. Maybe he said he changed his mind and he wanted to be more involved in their child's life. Maybe he even told her he would go with her to the sonogram the next day. His girlfriend Rebecca was at work, I assume. She definitely wasn't home, and he had the house to himself. I speculate that he shut off his security cameras or disabled them in some way so there would be no evidence that Kassandra had been there. Then he killed her in the basement, where the blood was found. The autopsy conducted on September 23rd showed that her body was in an advanced state of decomposition, but she had been stabbed several times, and there had also been blunt force trauma to her head. Colin most likely knocked her out and then killed her before wrapping her in garbage bags that he purchased that same morning with the intent to use them on Kassandra's body once he killed her. Which means he planned this, right? It was not some spur-of-the-moment crime of passion. I think it was premeditated. He then took her to the place where he had parked his truck, he dumped her car, went to Owens Beach, threw her cell phone into the water, and went home where her body still was. The next morning, he got up early, probably before his girlfriend Rebecca, so she wouldn't notice he was gone or see what he was doing. He then loaded Kassandra's body into his truck, drove to the area her body was found, and stayed there 10 minutes, just long enough to throw her body down a hill and pat himself on the back for getting away with it. 37-year-old Colin Dudley was arrested on September 22nd, and he was charged with the murder of Kassandra Cantrell. Now let's discuss a little bit, and let's start with what was he thinking. It may feel like nothing was normal in 2020, but one constant that still remains is Big Brother watches everything. Everywhere you go, every text you send, every picture you take, every Google search you make, it's being tracked and cataloged. Did Colin Dudley think that turning off his phone was sufficient to hide or cover up his deeds? Did he not consider that there are security cameras literally everywhere? I mean, maybe 10 years ago, security cameras were mostly on businesses, and half the time, they were just there for show. But now there's security cameras everywhere. Everyone's got one in their house, every business has one, and usually the cameras have a wide street views and look in multiple directions. Did Colin forget that there was a GPS in his truck? Did he fail to consider that Kassandra had a loving family and a supportive friend who were familiar enough with her day-to-day routine so that they noticed when something was wrong? Was Colin's plan to kill Kassandra and then go back to his girlfriend and act normally, never expecting anyone to show up and ask questions? He'd communicated with the victim from his own phone number the very same morning she went missing, and then he used that same phone to call the detectives to set up a police interview. Although I think it's safe to say that this was planned, I don't know how long he planned it. It could have been a couple of days, it could have been a couple of weeks, but I think it's also safe to say it was planned poorly, with very little attention to detail and honestly, very little knowledge of how a police investigation works. And it's not hard to decipher the motive in this case. Colin was already in a relationship, and he had been cheating on his girlfriend for several months, which would have been hard enough to explain and bad enough as it is. But when Kassandra became pregnant, a new layer of complication was added to the mix. He would now have to tell his girlfriend Rebecca that not only had he been cheating on her, but there was going to be a child. And I think Colin had made it pretty clear in the most creepy way possible that he didn't ever want children. Even if Kassandra told him not to worry and that she wouldn't ask him for anything, odds are he probably didn't believe her. And he felt that as long as Kassandra and her child were out there alive somewhere, there would always be a chance that it could come back and bite him. And Colin Dudley was not willing to take that chance. Colin later pleaded guilty, and the case did not go to trial. On November 14, 2022, Dudley was sentenced to just over 26 years in prison for the murder of Kassandra Cantrell. With good behavior, he could be out as early as 2044. You know, I feel so bad for Kassandra. She was known to be very sweet. Her friend referred to her as fireworks. She was the kind of person that light up the room she walked into. She was so excited to have this baby, even though she was pretty much going to do it on her own. But she wouldn't really be on her own, would she? She had her mother Marie, who was so excited. She had her best friend Alexandra, who had already gotten this baby cute little clothes for Halloween and who was going to Kassandra's sonograms with her. She had the support system in place. She didn't need Colin Dudley. She was going to do this alone, and she was excited and looking forward to it, and he took that from her. As we conclude our investigation on the devastating loss of Kassandra Cantrell, it's imperative to acknowledge the chilling reality behind her untimely death. Colin Dudley's heinous act, driven by the fact that Kassandra was pregnant, casts a stark light on the complexities of such cases and the profound consequences of such horrific actions. Dudley's guilty plea and subsequent sentencing serve as a form of legal accountability for this reprehensible crime. However, it cannot undo the profound loss experienced by Kassandra's loved ones or alleviate the pain caused by this senseless act of violence. Our hearts go out to Kassandra Cantrell's family and friends as they navigate through this profound loss. Let us honor her memory by standing against such atrocious acts and advocating for a world where everyone's rights and lives are respected and valued. Before we conclude, I encourage you to subscribe to our channel and giving this video a like if you enjoyed it. Thank you for watching, and please continue to share empathy and kindness wherever you go.